Do you have a personal kryptonite? Like, knowing what you know about how all of this works, is there still that one product or brand that gets you every time?
Yes, it's Apple. Absolutely.
Did you get the Vision Pro?
Without it, I didn't go that far.
Okay. I was about to perform an intervention.
Like, oh no. Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Julian.
And I'm Kirsten. And today we're actually exploring that little space between your wallet and your identity, which may sound uncomfortable, but
sounds vulgar.
It sounds a little like assault, but it's not. We're actually talking to Dr. Marcus Collins. He is the author of For the Culture and a marketing professor at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. He is a marketing guru. He is the brains behind some of the biggest campaigns in the world, things that you've definitely heard of. Like, he was the brains behind the Cliff Paul campaign with State Farm and the Made in America Festival. He also led sports music initiatives at Apple before running the digital strategy for the queen herself, Beyonce. Was that a B?
Sound more like that.
It sounded like an error, like I was wrong, a buzzer. But most importantly, and the reason why we are talking to him today, is because he has a PhD in figuring out why we're all suckers for a good story, especially when that story comes with a price tag and a side of FOMO. He understands how culture impacts our budgets. So if you've ever wondered why you're broke, but you look rich, or why you're still paying off that Peloton that you never used but bought during lockdown, he knows the answers. So stick around while we unpack the invisible price tag of culture, and hopefully by the end of the episode, you'll feel more confident about the cuts to your budget that you need to make to achieve your financial goals.
He's also a fan of Tribe Called Quest, so just by default, he has good taste. Wait for the end of the episode to find out what his favorite album is. I just had to throw that in there.
For a very small group of people, yes. Dr. Collins, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so stoked to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes. We always start every episode with explaining why we wanted to talk about the topic or why a guest is on there. And the reason I wanted to talk to you is because we've spent the last few weeks on our podcast kind of revisiting some core topics, things like net worth, paying down debt, buying a business, just basic financial literacy. But the success in every single one of those topics boils down to anyone's ability to reliably manage a budget. Like, that's what it boils down to. Whether you have a business or whether you're trying to buy a house, you got to learn how to manage your budget. And I feel like your work explains why that's so hard. Like, you have truly cracked the code on why we just can't stop throwing money at things that make us feel like we belong, like we are somebody. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I think it's fascinating. I read your bio, I read the book. Even when I look at all the things that you've studied, like if I were to craft a road to like advanced degrees, it would be in those things because they're so interesting. But I'm curious, like, what sparked your interest in studying human behavior and culture?
You know, it was serendipitous. It was not on my bingo card or my bucket list of what I would achieve. I started off in engineering because I did well in math and science as a kid. Growing up in Detroit, you do well in math and science in the 90s, you're going to be an engineer. So that's what I did, you know, especially if you're Black, you're going to be an engineer. So I go into engineering, realized I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to work in music. I mean, I played piano in church and sang in choirs. And I came home one summer during my college years and said, Mom and Dad, I think I want to be a songwriter. They were like, oh, no, you don't. That is not happening. So I finished my engineering degree, then went into the music business, and then went back to school to get my MBA, sort of looking at music, digital as a disruption, and marketing. And then found myself at Apple doing partner marketing in iTunes, went to go work for Beyonce doing digital strategy, then into advertising. And it was there in advertising that I sort of heard this word culture used all the time. And I was working for Steve Stout, who was an music industry guy who turned agency guy. And I just liked the way he kind of phrased things. And I was using the word culture all the time, And I realized I knew nothing about culture. I knew the word, but I didn't know what it meant. And then it became very clear that a lot of people didn't know what it meant. So I started studying the behavioral sciences to get understanding of what this thing is. And once I did, my curiosity was insatiable. I just started, the world just started to become much clearer. And as a practitioner, the clearer the world became, the more impactful, the increased efficacy of my work was sort of,
Yes.
it was gargantuan in its growth. And I was like, oh, this is the path. The better we understand the world and can describe it, the more licensed, more agency we have to navigate through it successfully.
Ooh,
That
I'm gonna
became the
steal
start
that
of my
answer.
career.
When people ask me why I'm a writer or why I'm a content creator, I'm gonna steal that answer. Because you're right. The better you understand the world, the better you can describe what's happening, the easier it is to move through it and make decisions on your own versus just like following some prescribed path.
It's right. You just see things that become so obvious that other people just don't see. I think about it when I watch videos of Kobe, like breaking down how he sees the game. And he's like, you see
Mm-hmm.
where his foot is pointed? Because his foot is pointed that way, he can only move this way or that way. I go, fam, I don't see that at all. But now you say it, I kind of see it. But that's just the world in
Exactly.
which he's operating. It's like Neo in the Matrix. You know, he's
Yes.
like seeing these things that no one else sees. And therefore, he navigates through the Matrix in a way that no one else does. And once I started to better understand the underlying physics of humanity, and you realize that, oh, all these things are sort of systematic. There's a system to everything. And when we understand the system, we can make interventions, we can manipulate, we can touch, we can move, we can impact the system.
Yeah, we are. I too, like in Kirsten, like very much fascinated by the work you do, and you're also one of those people. And this may sound weird, but in my life, where you see someone who's like, "Oh, I remember when I was interested in that thing," and it's like, "Wow, I guess if I had really stuck with it," and that's a pathway that I want. I've got like 5 of those things, right? Before I finally settled on the path that I ultimately ended up taking. But like, I loved seeing all the things that you were doing because in a way, I felt like, wow, this is kind of the work that I wanted to do. And I still find us doing our version of that. And specifically as it relates to money, and this isn't to brag on the work that we do, but I do think that we are different in that we do not double down on teaching people how to or what is.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because we have a pretty good understanding of who our audience is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that financial illiteracy is the problem. We
Mm.
have always said this is more of a cultural issue for the people that we're talking to. It's about helping them to understand why they think the way they do, why their bar is where it is. And then once they can crack that nut, then they can start to do all of the fundamentals, figuring out what a right size budget is for them. And one of the things that we have flirted with saying, and I'll admittedly say I don't think it has quite landed, but it's that marketing is a life skill. And for that, it's that you need to actually understand when you're being marketed to, what's the difference between news and, this study that has been paid for by XYZ. But all of these things, whether consciously or subconsciously, kind of shape our decisions. And I'm curious, like, do you agree with that? Not everyone can see with video, but like, I believe marketing is a life skill and is something that everyone should have an understanding of. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a bar, and it is so true. I write this in my book, and I say that this is not a marketing book. This is a people book.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
whether you have marketing in your title or not, you are a marketer. Why? Because marketing is the act of going to market. That's what marketing is. Like by definition, the 1455 definition of marketing that is communicated in the Old Oxford Dictionary is marketing is going to market. And what's the market? People. And we bring products to market in an effort to exchange for money. We bring candidates to market in an effort to get your votes. We bring thought leadership to market in an effort for people to watch our videos or download our newsletters. Like we are constantly going to market in an effort to get people to move. We bring ourselves to market as employees to get hired, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly going to market. And why do we go to market? To get people to adopt behavior. And if you don't understand why people do what they do, your chances of getting them to do something is basically relied on luck. But the better we understand people, we can move from being lucky to being likely. So
Ooh.
to your point, marketing is a life skill because we are constantly trying to get people to move. I mean, I'm trying to get my kid to eat peas. It's a challenge. You know what I mean? Like we're constantly influencing behavior, you know? And the better we are at that, life begins to kind of open up for you.
Yeah.
It does. I want to go back to what you were saying about how when you start to see things, you can't unsee them. Because ever since I read about how you talk about brands being consecrated in culture, I can't unsee the connection with religion and whether brand loyalty is just like capitalism's version of it. You know what I mean? Like now, every time I make a purchase, I'm like, am I just tithing to consumerism? Like, what is this exchange? Can you explain how that works and how consecrated brands transcend their practical use? Like
Yeah.
they reach this other level and become these identity markers, as you call them.
Marx, Weber, and Durkheim will be proud of you because that's true. So these are the founding fathers of sociology, and they studied culture by observing religion. And what they realize is that our engagement in cultural practice is religious. And well, what is religion? It is to bind to something, right? So we say we do something religiously, it means we are bound to it, we are committed to it. And our consumption practices are religious in nature. You know, there's some brands that are not just transactional; they are consecrated. You know, like Nelly once sang a religious ode to Air Force Ones. Give me 2 pairs. I need 2 pairs. You know, like these
Two
things
per.
become exactly 2 per.
To be specific.
There are just things that are, you know, you can't be your identity marker without them. You know, can you really be a sneakerhead if you don't own a pair of Jordans? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you really be fresh to death if your car don't got pull up ability to it? Like these things, like in the early 2000s, can you really say that you're about sustainability and not drive a Prius? I mean, these products are ways by which we signal our identity, not unlike a Jewish person would wear a yarmulke or a devout Catholic would wear a rosary. Like these artifacts, they have meaning beyond their functional use, and therefore we consume them as a way of making our culture material. They ascend from being these functional products to being these consecrated. They're almost deity like, these
Yes.
consecrated things. For instance, if I told you that Nike was going to start a religion today, you get a sense of what that might look like. You go, I can see that. There's a belief every human body is an athlete, so we worship at the throne of athleticism. You can get a sense of who the clergy would be. You know, it'd be Michael Jordan, LeBron James. You know, like you get a sense of what this is. Like you know what the hymnals, boom, ba-da-doo-doo, ba-da-da-da-doo, like you get a whole sense of what this is. Like it seems sort of comical on the surface. But the agency I used to work for as a chief strategy officer at Wieden Kennedy, we created Just Do It. Wieden Kennedy is Nike's agency of record since 1982. They're a founding client. And anybody who works at Wieden Kennedy and works on Nike knows 2 things. 1, Phil Knight hates advertising. Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. And 2, when you're making ads for Nike, you're not making ads. You are evangelizing the faith. You are preaching the gospel. Religion is just so tied into sort of how we do things, particularly
Yes.
consumption.
Yeah. That explains why we see Jake from State Farm courtside at every NBA game. And like, it's like, why is Jake there? But I know who he is.
That's right.
And I only say Jake from State Farm. I don't
That's
just say Jake expecting people to know. Like, he's been consecrated as a brand.
That's right.
Do you have a personal kryptonite? Like, knowing what you know about how all of this works, is there still that one product or brand that gets you every time?
Yes, it's Apple. Absolutely.
Did you
Without
get
a
the Vision
doubt.
Pro?
Without it, I didn't go that far.
Okay. I was about to perform an intervention.
Like, oh no.
I mean, Apple, I buy Apple irrationally. You know, I have products that work just fine, but when the new one comes out, I got to get it. You know, I got to get it. You know, and I feel like even their brands beyond Apple, like, you know, like every time I go to the mall for whatever, I was like, I got to go to the J. Crew store just to see what they got, right? Like anytime Polo has a discount, a sale, I was like, let me just see what's there. I just got to see it. My wardrobe is just fine, it's fine. And I wear a uniform on top of that. So like, come on, like, and I know there's not a lot of margin of error, which I'm buying new things, but they're just certain brands that are a part of my identity, and that's the thing, is that we consume things not because of what they are, but because of who we are. Ye put it this way, not Kanye West, old Kanye. He says, I spend $400 on this just to be like, you ain't up on
You
this.
ain't up on this. Yes.
I can't even go to the grocery store without some ones that's clean, a shirt with the team. It seems we're living the American dream. The people highest up got the lowest self-esteem. I mean, it's like consumption is a way by which we make our culture material. It's a way by which we make our identity tangible. And because of how we self-identify, we are weak to the idea of not consuming, because that's ways by which we're able to project who we are. We all got kryptonite, all of us.
Yeah. On your website and in your book, you say, I believe there's no external force more influential on human behavior than culture. Full stop. Completely agree with you. You go on to list several examples. The one I definitely remember was Patagonia, because first of all, I remember when I was first introduced to it back in my corporate days, and I didn't realize it was a thing after like the fourth or fifth time. It was a couple company outings, and I was like, why is everybody wearing these vests? I didn't know anything about it. It just was not in my world. And it wasn't until shortly after that, and I realized what it stood for, and then like almost everything about their office and who those people were made sense.
Yeah.
But as I'm thinking about our viewers and our listeners, and I'm thinking about like car lovers, and I do respectfully like enjoy beating up on car lovers. I don't know if you're a car lover at all. I am not. But from a personal finance standpoint, I think about car lovers and the amount of money that people spend like on their cars and like all of the things. Like it's ridiculous. My two-part question, like how do brands do this? Like how do they do this? How do they create such, dare I say, cult followings? And what can people do, if anything, to like break free from this chokehold?
So really great framing. Cars are probably the ultimate identity project. We buy them, and if we're not leasing, we hold on to them longer than others. We sort of groom them and like repurpose them so that like it keeps its luster, its shine, because of what it says about us to people who don't even interact with, people just onlookers, people at the stop sign, what it says about us, the ultimate identity project. So we spend a premium for it, even though the minute it drives off the lot, it depreciates. So economically and rationally, it makes no sense, but emotionally it makes all the sense in the world.
Yes, it does.
And I think that this is why brands are as powerful as they are. I mean, what are brands? By definition, brands are vessels of meaning. They're identifiable signifiers that conjure up thoughts and feelings in the hearts and minds of people relative to a company, a product, institution, organization, or entity. Like they're vessels of meaning that make us feel and think things, not because of what they are, but because of who we are. So how do brands leverage the power of culture? Is they think less about what they do and think more about why they do it, how they see the world. They invest into, here's our point of view, here's our conviction, right? The driving, operating belief that shapes the way we see the world. And because the way we see the world, we show up in the world accordingly. Patagonia, I think, is the GOAT of this. Maybe Nike, but Patagonia is just unbelievable, particularly because the silhouette of a Patagonia product is no different than North Face, no different than Columbia. In fact, I do this with my MBA students. It's supposed to be like the most savvy business minds, right? In my strategic brand management course, I put a slide on the board and I have 3 different fleece jackets, and I cover the logo, and I go, name the fleeces. Who own these brands? Whose brands are responsible for these fleece jackets? 100% of the time, they're always wrong, even if they're wearing the fleece that's on the board. They are indistinguishable. Like the product itself are they're parody. They're indistinguishable. But as soon as the logo is removed, people go, oh, they're like, but I'm paying a premium for that. that
Right.
Patagonia, not because of what it is, but because of what it means, its meaning. And people consume the branded products that are reflections of their identity. And identity congruence is worth the premium. Again, I'm an Apple guy. I could say with some sense of like self-awareness that the features and benefits on a like a Samsung or an Android device, like they are probably better than an Apple. Right? We can look at this pound for pound. The Android powered devices,
We're gonna
they've
edit
had
this part
features in
out.
the phone.
No, certainly their camera. That
Oh
green
my
bubble
goodness!
is a
Yeah.
Have you
problem,
seen
but
the camera on a Pixel on the Google Pixel? This thing is
amazing.
ridiculous, right?
Amazing.
Their features and benefits are typically ahead of Apple, but you ain't gonna never catch me dead with an Android device in my pocket. Never.
What I look like.
Why?
Exactly.
Because I'm an Apple guy. It is my identity. And I'll make all the rational arguments. I'll say, like, the vertical integration, whatever, nonsense. Nonsense, right? Just to justify it, right? So, because, well, why does that matter? Because Apple as a brand believes in challenging the status quo, bucking conventions. We've known that ever since they told us 1984 is going to be like 1984, or think different, right? This is for the crazy ones, the round pegs in a square hole. Like we go, that's me. And using this brand becomes a way by which I signal me. So for brands that want to navigate these cultural spaces, the first thing you start with is, what do you believe? Liquid Death sells water, two
Right.
hydrogen and oxygen. Like chemically, it is a parody to everything else, right? But Liquid Death believes in death to plastics. And they mitigate plastics by selling tall boy cans of water. They don't talk about the alkaline level or the pH balance or the electrolytes. They talk about a point of view, and people go, yep, that's my brand. The aesthetic matches how I want to be seen. And Liquid Death, in its 5 years of existence, is a $1.2 billion brand.
For water.
Water. So that's how we build brands to navigate in the space. How do we undo this? Is that we as individuals have to be mindful of it, right? That's how we get agencies, by being mindful of it and being intentional and going like, okay, listen, I know why I'm buying this. I mean, I tell my wife this. I'll say, listen, I am suffering from loss aversion right now, and that's why I'm keeping this subscription to the gym, even though I don't go to the gym. I know that. Like, I know why I'm doing this, right? Understanding how we cognate at least helps us rationalize our irrationality. Like, this is why I'm doing this, and I know I'm doing this, and that's okay. It is the sort of unconscious autopilot sway of our cognitive biases and the pressures, social pressures from culture, that I think gets us into trouble, right? When it informs how we vote, when it informs like us just buying, like I get my check on Friday and then I go to the club immediately, bottle service, blah, blah, blah. And then that money is gone by Sunday. Like, because I don't know why I did it, because it's just what we do around here. It's just kind of how things done. That's pretty dangerous. But if we say, look, I know what I'm doing tonight and I'm going to be reckless and I'm making that decision intentionally, as opposed to just kind of abiding by the cultural pressures that are pushed on me, I think that's more responsible.
Have you found any trends in your research where the collective consumer is using what the brand knows about them to their advantage? Like, if the brands know us so well, is there any evidence that we could use that to like ask for discounts or to inform where the next one goes? Like, we saw a little bit of that when it was Wendy's who was trying to roll out like surge pricing for their burgers, like dynamic pricing for fast food.
They came
And
for blood.
Everybody on Twitter was like, hell no. Like, we're not doing that. Like, it feels very American to ask this question, but because these brands have so much power over the citizens, like, should there be more of a collective approach to like wielding and directing them, or does that get too meta?
Well, no, I think that's spot on. So I think that, culture by definition, system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do, it is negotiated and constructed through social discourse.
Mm.
And a brand, an institution, an organization, a politician, a leader, etc., will do something, and then we collectively go, I don't know about that, fam, or we go,
Right.
that's kind of cool, we're doing it. And it's this sort of volley, this discourse between the zeitgeist, that is the collective minds of the people, and these institutions where we decide what's acceptable. So Wendy says, hey, we're going to do surge pricing, at dinner and at lunch. And we go, fam, you smoking crack. We ain't doing that. And Wendy's go, my bad.
Nuggets are
We ain't just
99
kidding.
cents always.
Exactly. Just kidding. We'll pull it back. We're going to pull it back. It's that discourse where we go, oh, too soon? Okay. Like, I don't know why this comes to mind. This could be like such a random example. Do you remember when Brian McKnight made this like erotic album?
No.
This was this is a deep internet search. This is like late 2012.
Okay.
An album that's like totally erotic. And it came out and people were like, have all the seats, Brian. Have every seat possible. Please stop this. And he didn't release the album. He had this one song that leaked on the internet, and then he pulled it because the audience was like, fam, stop today.
The audience been
that Brian
controlling Brian for a minute.
Brian stay wildin'. And the thing is that like when people continue to act, even though the collective has said stop, we go, they crazy. Or at the very least, they're not one of us. And that's essentially what Kanye West is.
Mm-hmm.
We go, did you hear us say we're not with this, fam? Didn't you hear us say this is not acceptable? Then we go, I wipe my hands of you. So the sort of the too long didn't read of this is that the discourse between the zeitgeist and brands and companies, entertainers, content creators, cultural producers, etc., we are collectively deciding what's acceptable. We call that process legitimation, right? Mm-hmm. What ideas, products, beliefs, behaviors are acceptable for people like us. And then we consume accordingly. And when there's not, we go, nah, we're not consuming, right? Jay-Z, I don't know why I'm thinking all the hip hop references, but whatever. There's one time in the early 2000s when everyone was wearing throwback jerseys. And Jay-Z said, y'all acting way too tough. Get a suit, get it tapered up. People were like, done with this throwback jersey. So much so that David Stern was like, Jay-Z, could you please stop? You are killing ourselves. Please stop. Right? Like the collective said, okay, cool. All right, we're not going to drink Cristal anymore. Cool. Got it. Done. Like this negotiation process, it is unpredictable. It's uncertain because you're not really sure where the wind is going to blow unless you have a very, very, very close proximity to culture, like we saw expertly executed with Kendrick Lamar and Drake this summer.
I mean, yes. I think what's also tough is that it's decentralized. It's not like there's a leader. Like we like to joke about, like there was a Black people meeting and we decided. It's like it's decentralized. It requires everybody kind of coming to the same conclusion at once. But then there are also these hype beasts that are in spaces that can shift a discourse or a conversation a certain way. And I'm so curious about hype beasts. Like I really want to understand what they get from being one. Like what is the payoff? Is it a sense of leadership or a sense of like power? Do they know that they are driving these trends? Is it clout chasing? Like what drives a hype beast? Because I know you talk about this in your book.
It's social capital, right? We have a higher position on the social hierarchy. And in doing so, we get access to more things, be it resource, be it financial, be it romantic. Like there all this value that comes from it. And I think that, we underplay the value of social, of people, and where we sit within the hierarchy of people. In fact, for centuries, the global GDP was practically nothing. Like for centuries, like we weren't entering into any exchange at any great scale until 16th century Queen Elizabeth had the idea that she would use consumption as a means of aggrandizement, as a means of power. And her thinking was this: royalty has everything, nobility have a little less, peasants have nothing. And the notion is that nobility will continue to consume in an effort to maintain their status in the social hierarchy. Peasants realized, looking up the social hierarchy, the only way to ascend was to consume. And that was the case for about 2 centuries. Till early 18th century, you started seeing a little activity happening in Northern Europe. Companies started making a little bit more money, so they paid their employees more money, and those employees went to go spend more money. So then more companies made more money, and they paid their employees more money, and then they went to spend more money, started to get this cycle of economic consumption. And then by the end of the 18th century, kaboom, massive explosion that we know as the Industrial Revolution. Now you got more companies hiring more people to make more things, more people spending more money, more. So what's the point of all this? Is that consumption from its very conception had nothing to do with value propositions, nothing to do with features and benefits, but everything to do with psychological and sociological impulses. And so is the same today. We do things so that we can stunt, right? And so being a hype beast, being one who has sway in the social discourse, or at least seemingly so, they do so because they're able to ascend up the social hierarchy because they get access to more things. Now, here's what the science tells us, though. The science tells us that the people with like large social media followings and like huge follower accounts and all the things, that those people, even the Kim Kardashians of the world, are no more, or just like slightly more influential than the person at your job. And why is that? Because we are most influenced by people like us, our people, right? So we'll see like Jay-Z wear a hat and be like, yo, that hat is dope. I got an outfit to match that hat. I'm buying that hat. And you buy the hat, right? So the initial influence comes from Jay-Z to the individual. But if you wear that hat out to brunch with your friends and they go, you look like a fool, take that hat off. Take that hat off. And you ain't never wearing it again. But if your friends go like, dude, Julia, that hat is killer. Where'd you get it from? You're like, I know, right? You ain't never taking that hat off. Like, it's the influence of our people. So the hype beasts, the talking heads, the celebrities, they create sort of bright wattage media of what is possible, potentially possible. Because to your point, there is no drum major, there is no memo. We're sort of navigating all this social ambiguity, trying to make the right steps so that we can ascend up the social hierarchy. Don't want to make the wrong decision until someone's willing to look silly just for a moment. And people go, I like that jacket. Where you get that from? And in that moment, normalization is starting to happen. And culture moves forward on the basis of one simple question. Do people like me do something like this? The answer is yes, we do it. The answer is no, we don't.
You're making me think of something else that I've said that I know did not take off, but maybe you can help add some sauce to it. And it was like, to me, and I'm still wrestling with it, but like to me, it was like the differences between aspiration and admiration. So when I think about who we wanted to be or what we wanted to create in terms of, because we recognize just how difficult it is to get people to audit their expenses, audit their financial decisions, pare down so that they can create a better financial future for themselves. We often rub up against these visions that people have in their minds of like what they think is possible for themselves. And a lot of times that's based on these people that they admire.
Yeah.
But what I've found is that there are people that you admire. You mentioned the Kardashians, you may like admire them, but you don't really like want to be like them. You know, it's like, I don't want to be that, but the people you aspire to be, like, there's a recognition that they are within reach,
right.
that I could wear that hat and not feel silly or like I'm stretching, stretching myself, right? That to me, I always thought was something that was interesting, but that a lot of people didn't quite understand that might have been affecting their financial decisions. Does that come up in any way in the work that you do?
Absolutely. We talk about the idea that, we don't compare ourselves. Like, we don't listen to, I don't know, you don't listen to like Big Pimpin' and then look at your bank account and go, I suck at life.
Right.
Because we don't compare ourselves to that. Like, we just don't compare ourselves to that. What they call ourselves, we keep up with the Joneses. The Joneses are people next door. And this is like the worst person to quote, but I have a quote anyway. Hannibal Lecter says, we covet what we see every day. You
Right.
covet your people. You look at your people and go, this person self-identifies like I do in the same stratosphere of life. So I'm going to judge myself by this person, right? They have all the resources that I have. I should be able to do what they do. It's like that saying, your success is judged by the success of your brother-in-law. It's like it's judged accordingly, right? Because they're within the circle, and therefore they're a great sort of a comparison. And that's the truth, is that humans are terrible at making value assessments. It's hard for us to look at a thing straight up and go, oh, it's worth this, or it's that, or it's good, or it's bad, or she's cute, or he's ugly. Like, we always compare it to something else, right? It's always a comparison. We're just natural comparers. There's a study that was done that asked people, would you rather make like $33,000 in a company where everyone makes $38,000, where your peers make $38,000, or would you rather make $30,000 when your peers make $28,000?
Mm-hmm.
And people chose the latter. I'd rather make less money overall,
knowing that you make
knowing
more
I make
than
more money
everybody
than these
else.
people, because I'm constantly comparing myself. It's my comparison helps me know where I am on the social hierarchy. It's just what it is. I mean, that means you'd rather be the best looking ugly person
Yep.
than be
A
the worst
strong
looking
6.
fine person. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's ridiculous, but it's true. It's just how we're wired. It helps us know kind of where we are. And I think we see that play out in our consumption. That's why people overspend in an effort to look like they're doing better than they actually are, because they want to keep up with the Joneses, which is interesting because everybody's kind of keeping up with each other. There's a great sociologist named Gabriel Tard. He says, society is imitation. We're just constantly imitating so that we can be in good standing with our people, right? Based on what's expected, people like us. Like, you open it up with this, that consumption is cultural, because everything we do is cultural. It's a way by which we make our culture material. And culture is essentially the expectations of what people like me ought to do. And if I self-identify by a certain way, I got to show up a certain way. So if I self-identify by this congregation in the church, I got to dress a certain way. So if people got the non-lated gaiters, I'm wearing non-lated gaiters. If I'm in the sorority and this is the way the rest of the women in the sorority look and dress, I got to do the same thing so that I fit in, so that I'm a part of what's acceptable. So to your point, like, there is the admiration and the aspiration. The aspiration sort of signals what's possible, and it's the people around us that we admire, that we see, are we aligned with them, so that we are sort of plumb with what people like us ought to be doing.
I feel like social media and algorithms specifically have warped what we consider the people around us. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about TikTok and how TikTok is like playing a content slot machine where any old body can go to the top of the charts, and whatever they're saying, doing, buying becomes the thing that everybody needs. But if you're not on TikTok, like, you have no clue. And it's not something that everybody in your neighborhood or your next door neighbor, but you feel like it is, because every time you open your phone, somebody else has like a plate attached to their thermos, or it's saying very demure, very mindful, whatever it is. Yeah. So are there questions that we can ask ourselves to snap out of like the digital world that we're in and say, am I doing this for identity reasons or virality reasons, or am I doing this because I actually need it?
Can I add on to that? Because I feel like we actually need a new phrase instead of keeping up with the Joneses, because I feel like it's been around for a long time. I don't think people identify with it, even though like in some cases they absolutely are.
Yeah.
But no one identifies with that. Like, I've never met anyone who's just admitted it. So you're right. Like, there's something about it. I feel like we need a new.
There's not a lot of Joneses anymore.
That's right.
Man, there's that too.
The Joneses are in decline. We need another name.
Well, I mean, this is really why I wrote the book, truthfully, because I feel like we're being influenced by these things, and it's hard for us to identify them because we don't have the language for them. I mean, language is just so important that when we can call a thing by what it is, we have more power over it, and we can decide, right? If we go, like, again, like, man, I study these things, so I call it by what it is. I go, this is loss aversion. This is confirmation bias. Like I know what's happening. And because I do it, I can either snap myself out of it or I do it with intentionality. I think that
Yeah.
like the work that you all do is really helping people be intentional about how they spend their money and how they manage their money. Is intentionality. The scary part is when we just do things without even knowing we're doing them. And you're like, fam, you're just setting everything on fire when you do that. Like wherever the wind blows, that's where you're going to go. And I think as a social scientist, what I'm trying to achieve is helping people see the world differently. And that first starts with describing the thing, giving it language, and giving people power then to navigate it. So social media, the media of people, I mean, it's just an extension of what we've always been. You know, I remember this very vividly when I was going from middle school to high school, growing up in Detroit, to Cass Technical High School. When I was in middle school, like we were like Disney outfits. Like I had an Aladdin shirt, my favorite shirt. I had an Aladdin shirt with like electric blue pants. You know, I was like, this is my favorite shirt. I mean, my favorite outfit. I was like, I'm gonna kill him today. Like that's how I was. And my
What year
first
was
day
this?
of school, I'm telling you, to be honest,
What year was this?
this was 1993.
Okay, yeah, I had those too.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
No,
for sure.
93. Like I had
Yeah.
bow biters on my sneakers. Like I was like, yo, I'm about to murder them with this Disney outfit. My first day of school in high school, I had yellow pants on with a Mighty Mouse t-shirt. Y'all couldn't tell me nothing. I mean, I'm like, I'm about to stunt. I got to school. Everybody, my purview, my calculus, everyone had on Nautica and Timberland, and Tommy Hilfiger and Polo. I was mortified. And when I got in the car, it was a half day. Thank God. When I got in the car, my mom was like, "How's your first day of school?" I was like, "We're going to the mall right now, right now. Burn my wardrobe. Burn it right now. I cannot go to school tomorrow looking like this." Like it was social proof, right? It was observing other people with whom I self-identified to get a sense of what was acceptable. Imagine that. Imagine your first day of school, that first day of school experience I had of high school. Every single time your thumb goes up and scroll, that's exactly what's happening. You're looking at it going like, oh, wow, I need to be this thin. I need to have like this, and I can't have that. And oh, wow, I should be driving this. And why aren't I in Lisbon when everyone else is? Like, it's that. And even, so that's like the social side of social. But then even like on LinkedIn, you're like, wow, why haven't I got promoted? Wow, I'm a loser. Why do I not work there? Wow, he's getting covered in this. Wow, why? Like we are constantly judging ourselves by our people. And so I think your idea of saying that like maybe we should find new language for keeping up with the Joneses because that doesn't feel like it's sort of tangible. Well, you're right, because it's not longer the Joneses, it's the Patels, it's the Lees, it's the Ragaswamis. It's across the board. It's global in nature.
Yes.
And Joneses just almost feel too small. And when it's that big and that sort of ethereal, it's hard to know that you're doing the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're obviously talking about all of these invisible forces that shape our decision making, whether you recognize them or not. But sometimes they aren't consumer products or things. Sometimes they're people that are largely influential and shape our decisions. I think about people who say things like, well, I come from a family of educators. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, or military families, those kinds of things. What advice do you have, or what, insights, can you sort of pull from your work that might help those people evaluate those kind of, or sort through those forces and help them to make better decisions, or at least be a little more empowered so that they are more comfortable making decisions on their own versus going with the flow of what has always been or what's been expected of them based on the people in their lives?
I think this requires identity inventory, realizing that maybe you did come from a long line of doctors or a long line of Michigan men or a long line of whatever the case may be, but that's only one part of your identity. You know, Crenshaw wrote in 1986, he brought the idea forward of intersectionality, that we are an amalgamation of different identity markers. And you may go, that's a part of me, but that's not all of me. Right. So I'm not going to do that. You know, when I decided to to try to be a songwriter, it was going against everything that was like in my identity, at least what was ascribed to me as a Collins. Like, you gonna be a musician? We don't do that. But I subscribed my identity to be a musician. And I was like, well, yes, I'm a Collins, but also I do these things. Yes, I am this, but also I do that. And it was sort of, again, having language to be able to identify a thing. It gave me agency to say, I'm gonna do both of them. Why can't I? Why can't I, walk and chew gum? Why can't I do those things? I think when we reduce ourselves to one singular box, not
Yes.
only do we strip away the power we have as full, whole selves humans, but we also reduce the opportunities or solutions by which we can go about living our lives. Right? We literally cut off our social, economic, and political power when we
Mm,
reduce ourselves to one identity marker.
I completely agree. And I think I'll end on this question
Yeah,
because it's a great segue. I think what you're describing is the power of our personal brands. And I'm wondering if there are a couple things that we can learn from these big, influential, powerful consumer brands that we can apply to our personal lives to get the things that we want, whether it is a promotion or to go on a date with this person or to stop doing things or become more aware about the things that are driving our behaviors. Are there lessons that we can learn that don't feel icky or manipulative from these big brands?
absolutely, at 1000%. Because biologically, a brand is a brand, right? It's an identifiable signifier, and they're brands that are companies, that are products, that are people, that are that are even geography, right? Like, you think about Italy, there are certain things that come to mind. You think fashion, you think cuisine, you think uh, uh, water, Venice. We think of all these things, romance, like these are all cognitive and affective associations that we tie to this vessel of meaning. The same thing goes with people. You think of Beyonce, you think about women's empowerment, right? These are all things like Kamala Harris, you think about freedom. Barack Obama, you think about hope. Like, these people stand in for something, right? That's what brands do. They stand in for something else. Well, what do they stand in for? They don't stand in for what they do. At least the strong brands don't. They stand in for why they do it, what they
Mm,
believe, their ethos, their ideology, their conviction. So just like Nike believes every human body is an athlete, what do you believe? How do you see the
mm,
world? And once you identify how you see the world, you go, okay, I believe the world is like this. Now the idea is I'm going to activate people who see the world similarly, whether it's the kind of company I work for, the kind of people that I date, the kind of people with whom I call friends. Like, those are my people. Those are the collective of the willing. So just like, Nike targets athletes, you target the people who see the world the way you do, your congregation. And when you do that, people will consume not because of who you are, not because of who you are, but because of who they are. And then they'll
mm.
tell other people like them who see the world similarly, and you start to get this network effect, that's when things really start popping.
Ooh, a word. I know there's going to be several people that listen to this episode multiple times. There were a lot of gems. Thank you for your time. Before we sign off, tell the people where they can find you, where they can find your book, and where they can keep up.
You can find me across the social web at Mark to the C, MarcTottec. You can find the book everywhere books are sold, from the Amazons to the Barnes Nobles of the world. Wherever you find books, that's where I am. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to come back. This was so much fun. I feel like we're just getting
Yes.
started. Look forward to the next time.
Yes, we would love that. You about to say something?
I was going to ask, what's your favorite Tribe Called Quest album and why?
Okay. I'll tell you my favorite, though I don't think it's the best. My favorite is Low End Theory. It's because it speaks to me. Is it a perfect body of work? No. I think that Midnight Marauders is a perfect body of work, but it's not my favorite.
I agree. 100%. And I get it. I get it. We don't have time to get into all the details, but I fully agree. I concur. Thank you.
Childish. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.